I designed an award-winning dungeon in just 3 days, and today I'm going to teach you to do it too. Okay, so you want to create an amazing dungeon crawl. Great. But first you'll need a general theme and location. Then you'll need some NPCs, some friends and some foes. There has to be monsters to fight, traps to trip, obstacles to overcome, treasures to find, and dynamic choices that will keep players engaged throughout. There is seriously so much to consider when creating a dungeon that if you're anything like me, decision paralysis can quickly set in, turning what should be an enjoyable experience into a stress-inducing chore. But I knew it didn't have to be this way. And that's exactly why I joined Indestructiboy's 5-room dungeon jam that was promoted here on YouTube. I wanted to prove to myself that I could create a decent one-shot adventure, and considering my work schedule, I knew that when I hit that registration button, I'd have no more than 3 days to get it all done. And yeah, I did it. My dungeon, titled Rotten Foundations, took 3rd place. Indestructiboy himself says, Rotten Foundations is an excellent one-shot sewer crawl for any BX derivative system. Paladin Pro's experience with OSR-style writing and format is clearly evident throughout, making this a perfect side quest to keep in your DMing arsenal for those nights where prep time is low and adventure demand is high. Which was honestly so surreal to hear from him. There were tons of amazing submissions, and the entire process was a total blast. Turns out all I needed to actually create something worthwhile was a hard deadline and a pipe dream. And that's exactly why the first thing you need to do when designing your own dungeon is to give yourself a time limit. You need limitations in order to get anything done. I think that most creatives get caught up in wanting everything to be perfect, but if you're never satisfied, then you're never done. And a finished project is way better than a Google Drive full of lost potential. But when it comes to visualizing your dungeon for the first time, it's really all about set and setting. Set meaning mindset or the general vibe that you're going for, and setting meaning, the physical setting that it takes place in. If you're already feeling stuck here, don't panic. Just think about the stories that you enjoy and how they make you feel. Then consider how or why they make you feel that way. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of clear-cut good versus evil fantasy. The stories that I love are often painted in shades of gray. That's why I'll never forget my first playthrough of The Last of Us, or my first read-through of the First Law trilogy. 2 stories that focus on moral ambiguity and the cost of doing what characters feel is right. These stories and the feelings they made me feel inspired me to create a dungeon with no clear good guys or bad guys. I wanted players to question the true intentions of NPCs as well as their own morals and motivations during play. But if you're more of a Brando Sando than a Joe Abercrombie, you should totally go in that direction. If you want the players to feel heroic, then you'll need to design encounters and provide options for players to choose that will help them become the heroes of their own story. So once you've settled on a mindset for your dungeon, the setting should come relatively quickly. Just trust your gut on this one. I wanted to create an adventure that felt rotten to its core, and so I decided that it would take place in a sprawling sewer system. The setting backs up the mindset. The characters will be enveloped in darkness. Their senses will be bombarded by putrid smells and distant noises. They'll be faced with tight corridors and perilous obstacles that will literally keep them on edge throughout. Having said that, a dungeon doesn't have to be a literal dungeon. If you want a more lighthearted, adventurous vibe, you could design a dungeon that takes place within the canopy of a colorful rainforest. Basically, if a setting makes you excited to create, then don't question it, just go for it. Once you've committed to your set and setting, you'll find that the rest of this process is made so much easier. From here, we'll be getting into the actual creation process. We'll be following the 5-room dungeon design guidelines that were required for the dungeon jam I entered. I highly recommend following this process, regardless of the size or scope of the dungeon that you want to create. I know this sounds kind of weird, but a 5-room dungeon doesn't literally have to be 5 rooms. Each room actually just represents the different sections that your dungeon definitely should have, which are the entrance and guardian, the puzzle or role-playing challenge, the trick or setback, the climax, big battle, or conflict, and finally, the reward, revelation, or plot twist. You can also combine these elements together, and they don't necessarily have to follow a strict order. Another simple trick that I always keep in mind when designing my own adventures is the 3 T's from Index Card RPG: timers, threats, and treats. These 3 elements are the essence of any memorable encounter, and if you think about it, basically any action movie, fantasy novel, or video game will contain timers, threats, and treats as well. Some sort of time limit, usually an amount of rounds determined by a dice roll, keeps the pressure on and the players moving. Threats, of course, provide the opposition that players will have to overcome, and treats can be anything from treasure, items, and weapons to a helpful NPC, a safe place to rest, or a piece of lore that will blow the player's minds. Your 3Ts should be featured throughout the dungeon in some way, but they don't necessarily all have to be in every single room either. An effective entrance or first room should set expectations and give the players a taste of what's ahead, but also hit the ground running with an obstacle to overcome before the players can actually move forward into the dungeon proper. Conventional wisdom will tell you that it's important to get players right into the action, and I tend to agree. Avoid the temptation to pull a speak friend and enter moment. After all, table time is a precious commodity, and nothing kills the energy in the room faster than taking an hour to get through the first door. The Guardian could be something as simple as a couple of goblins at the entrance, but it doesn't have to be so cut and dry. In Rotten Foundations, players are tasked with tracking down and assassinating a mad alchemist, and the first room is his home. The true dungeon lies in the sewers below, so the Guardian is actually the home itself. The front door is locked, of course, but players have several options for infiltration. A chimney leads to one side of the building. 2 dusty windows beg to be smashed open, and yeah, there's actually a key under the flower pot. Once inside, players are then left to explore the small home, piecing together clues that will lead them to the sewer system below. Alternatively, players could discover another route. An open sewer grate lies in an alley beside the home, allowing them to totally circumvent the first room altogether. But if players do take this route, they'll be dropped right into the thick of the dungeon, crawling with mushroom zombies, who then become the Guardians. In order to keep things moving, if players start to stagnate in or outside of the house, the GM will ask one player to roll a d6 and then announce that in that many rounds, town guards will begin to wander down the road. The Mad Alchemist is paranoid, and he's set up a few traps that act as threats, but if players manage to get around them, they'll pick up a few items that foreshadow what's to come. Okay, so now that players are in the dungeon proper, it's time to give them something to really chew on. But don't forget, this doesn't necessarily mean that a puzzle or role-playing encounter must take place directly after the first room. In fact, I think that truly great dungeons provide enough twists and turns that no 2 play sessions will ever go exactly the same. And personally, I kind of hate puzzles, especially in TTRPGs. I know it can be really tempting to include them, but if you GM'd for a while, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. Look, there's just something about playing D&D that renders even the most clever adults into clueless toddlers when faced with a traditional puzzle. So rather than stonewalling player progress behind some sort of trick, like guessing a riddle or placing items in a specific order, I always try to approach puzzle solving from a more skill-based perspective. Like, how are we going to cross the rickety rope bridge before it crumbles? Or, how can we get past these flesh-eating zombies alive? Don't design for a binary solution. Instead, present a challenge that could be overcome in a variety of different ways. This allows players to get creative, surprise their GM, and feel like they've accomplished something really cool, rather than just making the correct guess. The door slams shut and the walls close in. An NPC shows their true colors, stabbing the party in the back. The chest is a mimic. The most memorable stories are born in the midst of adversity. But avoid creating a gotcha moment in bad faith. A setback should create tension and put the players on their heels, but also give them a chance to overcome, gaining the confidence they need to push forward into the finale and really kick some ass. In Rotten Foundations, darkness plays a key role, and players are strongly encouraged to navigate by torchlight. But it also features a room full of blood-sucking monsters that are attracted to light, swarming any player that holds a light source. This challenges the players to question what's actually safe, and it also rewards them for adapting to the surprise and reversed expectation. Every great Zelda dungeon ends with an iconic boss battle that puts everything the player has learned to the test. It's a classic formula that works great in TTRPGs too. This is your moment to give the players exactly what they want, an epic finale with everything on the line. The climax is the perfect time for a Chekhov's gun moment too. Tease the final encounter throughout the dungeon with magic weapons or items that will give the players an edge. This also allows you as the designer to go crazy and throw a truly formidable monster at the players here. Maybe the boss is immune to slashing attacks, but it takes double damage from fire-based magic. Normal swords won't work, but luckily players found a scroll of burning hands a few rooms back, allowing their wizard to deal massive damage and bring the monster down. Setting up clutch moments like this is crucial to creating a satisfying experience for players, and becomes the ultimate treat in and of itself. Endings are really hard to pull off, especially for one-shot adventures, and there's a lot of pressure on the GM to get it right. If a dungeon simply ends, everything that the players just went through suddenly feels meaningless. Of course, some shiny loot could work, but if you want your dungeon to function as its own self-contained thing, I would avoid this type of reward because, well, it's over now. I mean, think about it. What are players going to do with a pile of gold in their final moments at the table? It's pretty late. Instead, I would encourage a more narrative-focused payoff. Maybe players discover the final ingredient they needed to save the rainforest from a terrible plague, or they simply save the kidnapped prince. Regardless of the theme that you've chosen, make sure that your ending really drives those feelings home. This is what will leave a lasting impression on players and encourage GMs to run your adventure over and over again. And that, my friends, is how to design an award-winning dungeon. Go with your gut and follow a tried and true method. Sprinkle in a few timers, threats, and treats, and you'll walk away with a unique dungeon that's begging to hit the table. And if you're interested in checking out Rotten Foundations, you can pick it up in the link down below. Seriously, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to be kind to yourself, and until next time, venture forth.